Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi, this biggest show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Manifest. This is a back-to-back episode situation, but I am watching these one at a time, so I just finished watching episode 7, so here's the review. Really quickly jumped me into it. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. So obviously we're dealing with the aftermath of the last episode and kind of how it's shaken a lot of people. It's shaking Angelina to the point that she's kind of like giving up and believing in the callings and everything. She just kind of lost her will because it's like she thought, hey, Pete follows his callings, he can be saved, but obviously it's like it ended up not being that thing because obviously I was like, this is something new. Like every time they come across something, they think they understand it and they figure out there's just so much more to the puzzle that they just don't understand, you know? And it's a sad situation with it. And I think it's an interesting parallel because, like, Angelina's kind of going through her test of faith. So it's been to a certain extent. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. And obviously, you know, Grace packing up Tariq's place, packing up their stuff so they can go back home. Cal's acting a little douchey this episode because he's not helping with the packing. And then later on, it's like, wait, you're getting rid of Tariq's stuff. And it's like giving it the goodwill. And the reason why he's kind of lashing out is because for him, it reminds him of when he came home and like his mom had already like got rid of all his stuff. It's like, so you're trying to erase Uncle Tariq like you trying to erase me, and she's like, no, that's not the case. Like obviously, it's just a thing of like that's how she's processing because like keeping all these reminders of her brother is going to be hard, you know. And it's like the same thing with Cal. It's like for her, it's like that him coming back was the happiest day of her life, but for her, it's like that in between time after losing him, like it was just too much and she had to get rid of anything that was kind of a reminder, you know? So it is a thing of like, you will always be a part of me. I would never erase you, you know? And it's just a situation where like Cal is also blaming himself for Tariq because it's like Tariq died trying to protect him. It's like the whole reason why they were there in the first place was protecting Cal from Jace, Corey, and Pete. So, you know, and I think there's also part of him and it's probably like, I'm kind of the centerfold to this whole thing, so he probably feels responsible in the sense of like, even though it's not his fault, like, once again, nobody understands this, let alone the kid doesn't have all the answers to it, even let alone the adults don't, you know? But I think it's a situation where he just probably blames us because it's like, I'm the centerfold of all this to a certain extent, and I wasn't able to help anyone. Like, I wasn't able to help Tariq, Pete, Corey, they all ended up, you know, dying, you know, so... But later on, his mom does give him Tariq's globe because it's like, you know, she used to come into his room, you know, when him and his dad were gone, and for her just like look around at all the things just to remember them. But for her, it's like she realizes now, like, you know, it's like things, they're just things. What's most important is the memories associated with them, and obviously she will always keep those. So it's like, yeah, I don't have a lot of Tariq stuff, but I make sure not to get rid of everything, and gave him like that volcano like snow globe, you know. So, and at the same time, Olive's trying to be there for Angelina because Angelina's like blaming herself, saying like it's kind of her fault. It's like, what have I really done for anyone? My parents were right about me. It's like, what happened to Pete? What happened to Tariq? And it's like, whoa, like that had nothing to do with that. Wasn't you? But for her, it's like, what good have I done to anyone? And Olive's like, you've been my friend. And she's like, well, it's only a matter of time before I kind of ruin that and kind of you get hurt in the process. She's just, once again, it's just, I think because she is someone who does have such strong faith, or at the very least she did before the complicated situation with her parents. Like I said, she's a little lost now. And like I said to it, like I always think it, like I brought up earlier, it's interesting just because of the parallel of Ben kind of being lost in his own way as well. In many different regards, there's actually layers to that aspect. But nevertheless, breaking it down, Olive is telling her not to leave because this is just as much her home. It's like, hey, you're part of the family. And she was able to calm down Edith. At first, I was wondering, like, is that supposed to be a sign of, like, you know, maybe it's just a sign of, like, oh, you do fit well, you jam well with this family. This kind of becomes your new family. But there's another part of my brain that was like, oh, does she have, like, a Zeke moment where she was, like, kind of empathing it? Maybe that's what that's winking a nod to. Maybe not. Because who knows, maybe getting Pete to where he was, though things didn't work out, maybe getting Pete to where he was part of her calling, and maybe it kind of tipped the scales in her favor. I could be wrong. But, like, because he didn't go about it the way, like, Zeke did, so it just could be, like, her just natural instinct. But there's also the thing of, like, you're also partly, like, yeah, the fact that she's like, yeah, you and me, we're family, and you're like, She kept saying it over and over again, and part of me is like, I hope it doesn't turn into a situation where that could go dark, where she kind of obsesses and kind of, like, goes a little, like, God, what would it be the word? I was going to say fatal attraction, but that's not the right movie to use as the analogy. I hope she doesn't try and, like, oh, this baby's mine type of situation. Kind of, I was about to say the best thing to kind of compare it to, there's plenty of Lifetime movies that would kind of fall in kind of a vein of that, but I hope it's not like she becomes obsessed with the baby and like, oh, like, Edith's mine and latches on too much to kind of fill that hole in her heart from, like, the abuse from her parents, them locking her up to, like, losing Pete like that. We'll see. I just hope it doesn't turn dark side. I hope it stays good, you know? So, we'll see. Like I said, I'm just throwing that out there. But obviously, there's also Michaela having her calling, and I love that, like, Drea is like, oh, it's happening right now, huh? It's like, okay, you go do that. I'll be right here, not knowing what to do. But it's not just Michaela that saw the calling, which is like a giant dark cloud. Other 828ers, including, you know him, you love him, Eagan. Which I wish it would come up in this episode because no one's going to know this. But the fact of the matter is, it's hard to say whether it's fate or not. Like, if Eagan stealing that pot worked out in a way because it led to, like, oh, that final piece to the last trial was found. But the argument could be, like, maybe if he had gone to Ben with that, like, maybe if he hadn't tried to steal it, like, that's the thing of, like, you don't know how it all works, because like, truth be told, is if that last piece had gotten to them sooner, they would have figured it out rather than, like, figuring it out at last minute. So it is a thing of, like, Eagan kind of isn't blamed for it, but also at the same time, maybe it would have never been discovered at all if he hadn't stolen it. So it's like everything kind of worked the way it was meant to, and maybe this was the best option. I don't know. But nevertheless. And because obviously Ben was in there with Sanvi, you know, and the doctor is kind of upset with him because it's like, oh, we've got 3 bodies now, Pete, Jason, Corey, and it's like everything's kind of going out the window, and it's like Ben's proceeding to be their guinea pig and everything. But obviously Ben's bringing up what actually happened, and the doctor's just kind of like, well, you guys are done here. And it's like, wait, what? For her, it's like, you guys aren't really giving us advancements in this, and I guess she feels like they're more of a hindrance than a help. But he's like, no, like, you got to believe me about everything. She's like, oh, at no point did I say I didn't believe you. And it's like, so why are you kicking us out for? Because I guess for her, it's like, she can never really do her job if they're always kind of hindering it to a certain extent, judging all the decisions she makes, because for them, it's probably like, oh, what you're doing is very cold and calculated, so that probably, like, plays a role in, like, why she's kind of kicking him out. But this episode does kind of confirm the theory I had of, like, okay, so it turns out Jace, Corey, and Pete have the exact same marker, a different marker than what's in the 828ers. I don't know if that came up earlier. Maybe it did. That Zeke and home dude that they referenced this episode, the other, like, dude who ended up dying, did they ever, maybe they brought that up back in season 1, and I don't remember that their markers being different from the 828ers. I just thought that was interesting. I was like, I didn't remember that. But it's like, okay, and now the 828ers have a very specific marker, so it kind of confirms, like, as Zombie kind of describes it, a lifeboat. Jay screwed over Corey and Pete, and it's like, same thing for the 828ers. All it's going to take is one 828er to sink this lifeboat. So now it's a situation of trying to get everyone on the same page. It's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of do or die now, because it's like, we need to figure this whole thing out, because Ben's kind of on a situation of, like, he was kind of all about just following the callings, but now he's trying to tell Zombie, like, we need to stay here and make sure, like, Eureka might find a science approach to this that we need to kind of, like, approach. Like, we need to find whatever angle. He's kind of leaning more towards Zombie. Zombie was trying to find, like, a science angle, like, solution to all this, so it's kind of like he's leaning more in that direction, because it's like, we need to, like, you know, observe all options, because now knowing what their potential fate will be, you know. But once again, Ben's coming out of Eureka, and all those 828ers see it, and it's like, oh, why is Ben leaving here? So it's like, oh, obviously he's not seeing the cloud, and it's making them suspicious. Like, oh, don't do this. I was like, Eagan, you steering some shit up. So Michaela confronts him about it, and it's like, oh, I'm the guinea pig, and she's like, why would you do that? It's like, and he lays it out, his theory, and, like, Michaela's kind of reluctant to believe that, because it's like, oh, just coincidence. It's like, no, like, he explains the lifeboat analogy and stuff like that. And she's like, you're the one that was all about, like, you know, following the callings and everything like that. He's like, no, I haven't lost my faith in the calling. I've lost the faith in us, because, you know, it's like, we have to come together in this situation, because if we're not in this together, we all drown, you know? And that includes Michaela, that includes that includes Cal, like, so many innocent people, so many people they know will die, you know? TJ, Sanvi, just to name a few, you know? So, I mean, even Angela. So, because even bringing up the whole thing of like, right, Home Dude and Zeke, their death dates were their own. They were their own lifeboats because they were the only ones being judged at the time. So, Michaela's kind of like, you know, believes that there's like that kind of, she's kind of leaning more towards like Ben shouldn't kind of believe in Eureka as much as she should, but for Ben it's just like, I got to keep all options open, like this is a viable option. And as Michaela's driving away, like her hand starts glowing, and I'm like, that's so interesting, because then like Ben turns around. So I don't know whether the 828ers saw that or not. It's unclear whether they saw like his hand glowing, and it's like, well, the hand glowing thing's kind of been Ben's thing up until now. He's the only one. So now that it kind of went to everyone else, because we never got a solution about that, like what the hell that was about. Like, maybe it's supposed to be kind of like a sign of following Ben, maybe? I don't know. But Eagan kind of convinced the other 828ers, like, oh, we got questions about blah, 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 blah. You know, I'm doing that a lot lately, sorry. Got questions about what he's up to, and it's like, that evil facility you came out from, and they literally kidnap him. Which, first and foremost, I'm going to say it, this is some BS. I mean, it's like, everything Ben's done, reaching out to every single person, making sure everyone's okay. He's been trying to keep everyone alive, and this is how you repay him? By screwing, like, that's some BS, dude. Ben's done nothing but fall, sacrifices, keep his family, see, to help everyone else. Any information he finds out, it's like, okay, it's only right that you guys know, like, we need to follow the callings, blah, blah, blah. It's like, he's letting you know, like, what you want him to do, completely keep you in the dark? It's some BS, especially you, Eagan. Once again, you're the reason why things potentially went sideways with Pete, Corey, and Jace, because they didn't have all the information, because you stole the vase. Once again, maybe that's the way things were. Like, maybe that is the best option, because if you hadn't stolen the vase, maybe things would have been worse off, because they never would have ever found out. Who knows how this whole thing would have worked. Because even Ben's calling him out later on, and Egan's like, I always follow the callings. Yeah, I skim a little off the top, sure, but I always follow the callings, and you're up here pressuring us, telling us this and that. It's like, well, because for them, it's like, who are you to dictate, like, terms in this situation? And they're like, he's the dude doing all the research. What do you guys aren't really... A lot of people kind of just shrug this stuff off. I mean, it's like multiple people have been saved because of the stones and stuff like that. So it's like, it's such BS. It's like, you people who don't know anything. Eagan doesn't really know Ben. Hell, Corey's brother got saved, and that in turn potentially had a huge effect on Corey, ended up helping him kind of end up being saved. Granted, it all meant nothing because of Jace, but still, you know, an innocent kid was saved. So it's like, that's why I was saying it's so messed up for you to question Ben, considering you were there when he helped save someone's life. You claiming that you were going to help with something, but truth be told is you were trying to steal from the place before it blew. It's like, you know, it's like he's calling Ben a hypocrite and stuff like that. And Ben kind of lays out like, all right, the NSA is investigating 828, and it's like, oh, you're helping them and stuff like that. He's like, yes, because they can help us. He uses the lifeboat thing. He ends up saying like, I believe we were resurrected. They're kind of in that belief. And you can also get where Egan's coming from, where he's basically suggesting like, you know, like we saw what happened last season with, you know, referencing the Xers of like how they treated us, because like, you know, the way people, you know, some people worship them, some people hate them, like the Xers. Andre's people, the people he kind of built up that following behind, all you know, follow and loved and believed in the miracles of the 828ers. But in the grand scheme of things, it's like you can understand where Egan's coming from when he makes a comparison to the Salem witch trial, and like it's like, no, it's different now. It's like, is it really all the Xer shit that went like down last season should be proof enough to you? Like, the fact of the matter is, it's not so different, that the world, people can get scary and very mean and angry and bloodthirsty when it involves something they don't understand, you know. Something that they perceive a certain way, and it's like the world. A lot of people in this world perceive us a certain way. If they find out we were resurrected, it's gonna be over. We're gonna be burned at the stake. Like, dog, the Xers were bad, especially because the Xers. Because that was a running theory, like in season 1, and I think the Xers kind of believed it too, is like that they're not human, that there's something, or like obviously that was a running theory for like from the some people in the public of like maybe like even suggest, you know, because there was even a storyline about someone being like, oh, so and so wasn't my person, because like that wasn't them anymore. It's like they kind of like abandoned someone because it's like there's no way that's them anymore, because the person I love is gone, and this is someone just coming back, kind of like a body snatcher type of thing of like, oh, just someone like looking like them type of thing. So So Egan's thoughts aren't too far off. Obviously, you have Michaela trying to track down Ben when she finds out she gets a feeling like Ben might be missing, and she gets Drea to help her. And so they look into investigating and stuff like that, but they come up empty-handed. No, because they can't find Eagan because he's very off the books. But then Ben, using the refrigerator / freezer, he was able to kind of send a message to her old email, and she was able to pick up on it. It was like, okay, cool. I got the general area, but then it's like, yeah, there's not regular houses here. Like, would someone of Egan's nature really hide here? But then, like, Drea kind of points out, like, no, I think you're in the right place. Because, yes, someone who's trying to hide would disappear, but someone smart hides in kind of plain sight, you know? So a place like this makes it seem like the obvious choice of, like, no, they wouldn't stay here. That makes it the smart choice to stay there, so... But as Ben and Eagan are having these conversations, because it turns out the cloud that they kept seeing is over the loading dock. But it's like, what's in the loading dock? I mean, Ben doesn't know the ins and outs of that Eureka building, so it's like, I have no idea what's going on over there. So, when it's all said and done, he makes a promise to Eagan, like, oh, I can be your insider. And he's like, okay, how can I really trust you? It's like, the fact of the matter is, whether you believe in the lifeboat or not, Eagan, I do. And the fact of the matter is, screwing you over is going to screw me over later on and everyone that I care about. So I'm not going to screw you over because we all need to be in this together, you know? Hell, they were like, they beat him up a little bit later on, zip tied him to the chair and everything. And then like Michaela and Drea roll in and he's like, all right, like unzip tie me. Like, we got to make this like, try to make it seem like, no, it's a misunderstanding. I wasn't kidnapped. And she's like, oh, so you just happened to be here? Like, what? It was just like, you just forgot your phone or your dinner. And he's like, yeah, just, you know, and trying to make it, he's like, I'm not pressing charges. But, which is interesting. And I think maybe this is kind of them winking and nodding to it. Michaela kind of did a similar thing when it came to Corey, Jace, and Pete. When it's like the calling was saying, let them go. What'd she do? She arrests. So Ben's telling her, like, no, just forget about it. But it's like, no, I'm going to arrest Eagan anyway. Kind of like, oh, you're in this place that, a private property that you're not supposed to be in. So at the end of the day, Eagan's like, remember, Ben, Professor, what side of the fence you on? And so Michaela's like, you know, what did you guys talk about? He's like, nothing. And it's like, so, because Michaela's trying to interpret everything. Ben is trying to interpret everything as well. At the same time, Sanvi and Home Dude, because I'm forgetting his name. Obviously, Sanvi's last day here, so it's like, I got to make it all count. So basically, because of her and Ben looking at some of the stuff, everything, whether it's the tail fin, all the people who've returned, all have these particular elements on them. Then these elements combined together turn into Sapphire. It's like, okay, so Sapphire, like, it's like, for so long we've been looking at everything unrelated. The planes, the passengers, whether it be Zeke or the three methods. It's like, what we needed to do was look at everything in totality. We needed all, like, that they're all connected by the Sapphire. The doctor, she was like very dismissive of it, but then it turns out like you might actually have found the key to, and Sanvi's like, what, the divine? So maybe like this Sapphire element is supposed to be that. It's supposed to be a sign of that. So she ends up showing Sanvi something in a case later on, and it's like, well, what the hell is that about? We don't know what's in it, but there was a symbol on the front of it, and I was like, I'm sure it's a symbol we're supposed, either it's like, oh, take note of this symbol, or it's a symbol of like, oh, you're supposed to know what that is. I was like, because at first I was like, is that supposed to be like a royal coat of arms or something like that? What's also interesting is like, as they were coming in, like they were using like a device. You know, I mean, it could have been indicating other things, but that was like a radioactive reader. Like maybe whatever it is might react negatively to radiation, so maybe that's what they were checking to make sure no radiation levels, or maybe it's just kind of being like, oh, to make sure whatever this isn't leaking or something. I don't know. Have no idea what it is, but obviously, once again, that doctor lady, dude, I'm super suspicious of her. Just like, once again, it's like, I feel like she could easily go down the path of the Major, but, you know, maybe that's what they're setting up, maybe not. Which, speaking of the Major, Michaela kind of figured out that Jared had kind of moved on, and it's like, no, that's good. I'm glad we can just remain friends. And I was like, who would he possibly be dating? Because I brought it up like maybe last season. I would have assumed him and Drea would have gotten together. I thought that would have been interesting, but no. But now it's like, oh, none other than the Major's daughter. I was like, that's interesting. That's a weird interesting circumstance. It's borderline conflict of interest, not in a legal sense, but more so just on a personal sense, because it's like, right, her mom was capturing and experimenting with 828ers, but it's like, that was her mom. She has nothing to do with it that we're aware of, because who knows if she decides to take over the family business or something like that, that maybe she's trying to get close to Jarrett just to pump some information, not just about her mom, but also like 828ers and stuff like that. I don't know. She did try to go after Michaela first, but then found Jarrett. But maybe that was the whole point. Maybe she knew she couldn't get to Michaela and knew she could manipulate Jarrett. I don't know. It's just, I'm like, the fact is they set that up, I'm just kind of immediately like doom and gloom about it. I'm like, oh, that's not going to work out. To be fair, his last relationship, was kind of a lie because it was him undercover. I get that same feeling and inkling from this. Like, this might be, I don't know. Maybe it'll turn out to be a good thing for Jarrett, but I don't know. It's like dating the Major's daughter just seems like, I don't know, it seems like trouble. Because I think it's also going to be a thing of Michaela being like, oh, well, she's an innocent person, but I'm sure Michaela's going to be looking into her. It's like, yeah, I care about you, Jarrett. I just don't want you mixed up with the wrong person. And for him, it's like, my relationships are none of your business. I can see it going down that route. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Am I reading too much into it? Am I thinking too far ahead? That's usually what I end up doing most times. Am I going to be... There's a strong possibility I could be wrong, but it's just like, I just get a bad inkling about that situation. So, we'll see. You also have Eagan, I love that he's in the jail cell and he's telling the dude, like, yeah, because you do this and this, I know, like, because he keeps beating him in rock, paper, scissors, and he's like, oh, so you did know, so you are cheating. He's about to get his ass beat. But luckily, Ben had paid his bail. And Eagan was like, oh, like, the fact is that you paid my bail and everything. But then, like, Ben was like, let me set you straight on this. I will be your insider, but the fact of the matter, get your people in line. He's like, if I don't, it's like, no, that's not a request. You're going to do it. The fact of the matter is, you're not going to you and your people aren't going to jeopardize everything. And he's like, the fact of the matter is, and you ask me which side of the fence I'm on, don't ever play another stunt like that against me or anyone, or you're going to have me to deal with. I was like, ooh, dark side Ben. Ben's dark side has come out a little bit from time to time, but it's like, ooh. And I just don't think Egan's going to respond well to that. We'll see, but he kind of, like... He's such a smug douche that I'm like, yeah, I don't think he likes being challenged like that, and Ben kind of stepped to him like that. So, yeah, considering all the shenanigans you pulled this episode, he has every right to kind of be pissed at you. So, but Eagan, like, it rubbed him the wrong way, and we'll see whether that ends up tipping the scales as a very bad directions later on. Also had an interesting development that at the very end of the episode, Ben returns to Eureka and he sees the calling. So everyone, like, either that might be implying that Ben couldn't see the calling because he believed in Eureka too much. He was kind of relying on it too much rather than having full faith and just kind of like leaning more into the callings. But now that he kind of chose this side of things, now that he's kind of on the quote unquote right side of the fence again, now he can see it. Maybe that's kind of what that's implying. Like, you were just too close to the situation to see it, but now that you've taken a step back, now you can see. And so this, because part of me was wondering, because the way he was talking about it, it's like, oh, the cloud, he was saying the clouds aren't like from the sky coming down, like kind of like a storm or something. It's like, no, they were down, coming from the building going up. My thought was like, oh, is it supposed to be a fire? I thought this was supposed to be a calling, kind of like, oh, you're being judged what choices you make, because I thought like maybe they're going to try and burn down the Eureka building. I thought that's where that was going to go, in particular the loading dock, but it's like, no, whatever that thing is, it's doom and gloom, and like, you need to watch out. So, like I said, maybe there's something that's come up earlier in the show, whether it's prior seasons or whatever, that's like, it's this. Maybe we'll get answers for it next episode. Once again, I'm watching these one at a time, so I'm really interested to see what the next episode has in store for us. I'm going to be watching it immediately as soon as I finish this recording. Like last time, these aren't going to be cut together. They're going to be separate recordings, so they're going to be separate, like, reviews, videos, whatever you want to label them as. And so I'm going to try and put them up maybe 30 minutes apart, maybe an hour. It just depends on when I get to it. So just to keep that in mind, so. But I'm very excited to see this next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.